David, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Victoria's voice carried that same cold authority she used in boardroom takeovers, but her hands trembled as she set down her pregnancy test on the granite kitchen island between us. This changes nothing about our marriage. The plastic stick might as well have been a loaded gun. Two pink lines stared back at me like accusatory eyes, and my world tilted on its axis. We'd been trying for a baby for 3 years. 3 years of fertility specialists, hormone treatments, and Victoria's increasingly distant, "We'll figure it out later," responses every time I brought up adoption. "Congratulations," I whispered, though something in my chest was already cracking. "How far along?" 12 weeks. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "David, there's something else." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of her Sub-Zero refrigerator. A refrigerator that cost more than most people's cars, bought with money from Kane Industries, the empire her father built and she now ruled with an iron fist. I'd always been proud of her success, even when her wealth made me feel like a small-town accountant playing dress-up in designer clothes she bought me. Something else. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Victoria straightened her shoulders, and I recognized the stance. This was CEO Victoria, the woman who'd fired 3 department heads in one morning without blinking. "The baby isn't yours." The words hit me like physical blows. "Not ours. Mine." I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles went white. "Richard and I, it happened during the Singapore acquisition. You were in Ohio with your mother when she had her surgery." She spoke like she was delivering quarterly projections. "It was a mistake, David. A moment of weakness after 18-hour days and too much wine." Richard Sterling, her business partner, the man who'd been her father's protege before becoming co-CEO when the old man retired. The man who'd stood beside me at our wedding 5 years ago, shaking my hand and calling me brother. A moment. The laugh that escaped me sounded broken. 12 weeks ago was 3 months of moments. For the first time, Victoria's composure cracked. "It doesn't matter how long. It matters to me." The words exploded out of me. 3 months, Victoria. 3 months of you coming home late, of canceled dinners, of you being too tired to even look at me. 3 months of me thinking something was wrong with us, with me. She stepped around the island, reaching for me, but I backed away. Her manicured hand fell to her side. "David, please. I need you to understand something." Her voice softened, becoming the Victoria I'd fallen in love with. The woman who'd cried in my arms after her father's heart attack, who'd whispered her dreams of building something meaningful together. "Richard can't know about this baby." My heart stopped. "What?" "He's married to Senator Blackwell's daughter. If this comes out, it destroys everything, his political connections, the Senate contracts we're bidding on, the European expansion. We're talking about billions of dollars and thousands of jobs." I stared at her, this woman I'd loved for 7 years, married for 5, and suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. "So you want me to?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I want us to raise this child together." She said it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "You've always wanted to be a father. This is our chance." "Our chance?" The words tasted like ash. "Victoria, this isn't our chance. This is me raising your affair baby, while you and Richard continue building your empire on lies." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I stepped closer, and for the first time in 5 years of marriage, Victoria Kane took a step backward. "Tell me, what exactly is it like when your wife of 5 years comes home pregnant with another man's child and expects you to smile and play daddy while she protects her lover's reputation?" "You're being dramatic." "I'm being dramatic?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh enough to make her flinch. "Your affair partner is more important than your husband, but I'm dramatic?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, Los Angeles glittered in the evening light, a city full of dreamers and deal-makers, and I realized I'd been both, dreaming of a life with the woman who'd been making deals behind my back. "David." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "I love you. That hasn't changed." "No," I said quietly, something cold and certain settling in my chest. "What's changed is that I finally see who you really are." I walked past her toward the hallway, my mind already spinning with a clarity that surprised me. For 3 years, I'd felt inadequate, small, like I was disappointing her somehow. Now I understood. I hadn't been disappointing her. I'd been inconvenient. "Where are you going?" Panic crept into her voice. I paused at the doorway without turning around. "To pack a bag." "David, wait. We can work this out. I'll give you time to process, but then we need to discuss how to handle this practically." "Practically?" I I turned back to face her one last time. You want to know what's practical, Victoria? What's practical is that you've just handed me the one thing I never thought I'd have. What's that? Freedom. I met her eyes, and for the first time in years, I wasn't the one looking away first. And you have no idea what I'm about to do with it. Welcome to a story about betrayal, transformation, and the moment a quiet man discovers that sometimes the most devastating power comes not from shouting, but from walking away, and what you build in the silence that follows. I drove to the only place that had ever felt like home, my brother Jake's auto repair shop in Riverside. The 40-minute drive gave me time to think, to remember how I'd gotten here, to piece together the signs I'd been too blind to see. 7 years ago, I'd been content with my life. I ran a small accounting firm in Riverside, helped local businesses keep their books straight, and spent weekends rebuilding classic cars with Jake. Simple, honest, real. Then Victoria Kane walked into my office. She'd been 26, already a vice president at Kane Industries, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her father wanted to buy the strip mall where my office was located, and she needed someone to audit the books of all the businesses. "Mr. Chun," she'd said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I understand you're the best accountant in Riverside County." I wasn't. I was probably the only accountant in Riverside County willing to work for what she was offering. But something in her green eyes, a vulnerability she tried to hide behind boardroom confidence, made me want to be worthy of her praise. The audit took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of her stopping by my office, initially to check progress, then to bring coffee, then just to talk. She'd grown up surrounded by wealth, but isolated from real connection. I'd grown up middle class, but rich in family and friendship. We were opposites in every way that mattered, and somehow that made us perfect complements. Or so I'd thought. "She played you from day one, didn't she?" Jake looked up from under the hood of a '67 Mustang when I walked into his shop. My brother had always been able to read me like an open book. "That obvious?" I grabbed a beer from the mini fridge he kept in the office corner. "You've got that look, like when Dad told us Santa Claus wasn't real." Jake wiped his hands on a rag, studying me with concerned brown eyes that matched my own. "What happened?" I told him everything. About the pregnancy, about Richard, about Victoria's calm assumption that I'd simply accept my role as the convenient husband raising another man's child. Jake listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. 3 months, he said finally. "That's not a mistake, David. That's a relationship." "I know." The beer tasted bitter. The worst part? I spent those 3 months thinking I was the problem. She was working late, distracted, distant. I thought maybe she was disappointed in me for not being successful enough, not fitting into her world. "Her world," Jake scoffed. "You gave up everything for her world." He was right. When Victoria and I married, I'd sold my practice to a larger firm and moved to Los Angeles to be closer to her work. She'd insisted on paying off my student loans, buying me a new wardrobe, getting me a position at a prestigious accounting firm that served high-net-worth clients. "I wanted to give you the life you deserve," she'd said. What she'd really wanted was a husband who wouldn't embarrass her at charity galas and board dinners. Someone grateful enough for the upgrade that he wouldn't ask too many questions about her 14-hour days and frequent business trips. "You remember what you were like before her?" Jake asked. I did. I'd been confident, self-sufficient, proud of the business I'd built from nothing. I'd coached Little League on weekends and played poker with the guys on Thursday nights. I'd been planning to propose to Sarah Martinez, the teacher who lived in the apartment above the bakery. Then Victoria happened, and suddenly my simple life felt small, insufficient. Her attention was intoxicating. This brilliant, beautiful, powerful woman who claimed to see something special in me. I'd been so grateful for her love that I'd slowly erased myself to become the man she needed. "Sarah Martinez," Jake said quietly. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed?" I had wondered. Sarah and I had dated for 8 months before Victoria entered the picture. She was sweet, genuine, content with quiet dinners and weekend hikes. She wanted kids, a dog, a house with a garden where she could grow tomatoes. Everything Victoria claimed to want, but was always too busy to pursue. "Sarah's married now," Jake continued. 2 kids. Teaches 2nd grade at Roosevelt Elementary. Her husband owns the hardware store downtown. Good for her. I meant it. Sarah deserved happiness. "She asked about you at Mom's birthday last month." I looked up. "What did you tell her?" "That you were living the dream in Beverly Hills with your millionaire wife." Jake's tone was carefully neutral. She said she hoped you were happy. Were you happy? The question hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time I'd been genuinely happy? Not grateful, not impressed by my surroundings, not proud of my wife's accomplishments. Actually happy. I couldn't remember. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Asterisk David, please come home. We need to discuss this rationally. I know you're upset, but running away won't solve anything. Asterisk. Running away. As if recognizing betrayal and refusing to accept it was somehow childish. Another text. Asterisk Richard doesn't know about the baby yet. I need time to figure out how to handle this situation. Please don't do anything rash. Asterisk. She's scared, I said, showing Jake the messages. She should be. Jake's voice was hard. You know what the worst part is? She's still thinking about protecting him. Not you, not her marriage, not even the kid. She's worried about her boyfriend's reputation. My phone rang. Victoria's name lit up the screen. Don't answer it, Jake said. But I was curious. What was Victoria Kane's next move when her careful control started slipping? David, thank God. Her voice was breathless, like she'd been crying. Please come home. I need you. What's wrong? Richard called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Someone leaked information about potential ethics violations in the Singapore deal. If this gets out, her voice broke. David, I could lose everything. Ethics violations. My mind raced. Victoria had been in Singapore for 2 weeks during the acquisition. 2 weeks when she'd called me every night, describing exhausting days of due diligence and legal reviews. What kind of ethics violations? I can't discuss it over the phone. Please just come home. I need my husband right now. There it was, the vulnerability that had hooked me 7 years ago. Victoria Kane, Ice Queen CEO, needed me. Except now I heard something else in her voice. Fear, yes, but also calculation. She wasn't just scared about the business scandal. She was scared about what would happen if Richard Sterling learned he'd gotten her pregnant during a period of potential criminal activity. I'll be there in an hour, I said. Jake grabbed my arm as I hung up. Don't fall for it. I'm not falling for anything. But I need to understand what I'm really dealing with. Promise me something, Jake said. Whatever you're planning, whatever your next move is, don't let her charm you back into being her convenient husband. I looked at my brother, this man who'd never let anyone make him feel small, who'd built his business with his own hands and slept peacefully every night knowing he'd earned everything he had. The man she married died tonight, I said quietly. She's about to meet someone completely different. The drive back to Beverly Hills felt like traveling to another planet. Manicured lawns, gated communities, and houses that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. For 5 years, this had been my world. Tonight, it felt like a beautiful prison I was finally seeing clearly. Victoria was waiting in the living room when I walked in, still wearing the same clothes from earlier, but looking smaller, somehow more fragile. She'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, and her usually perfect hair fell loose around her shoulders. Thank you for coming back, she said softly. I sat across from her, maintaining distance. Tell me about Singapore. Her composure cracked just slightly. What do you want to know? Everything. The peninsula Beverly Hills reeked of old money and older secrets. I'd been here before with Victoria for charity galas and business dinners, always feeling like an imposter in borrowed clothes. Today, wearing my own jeans and a button-down shirt I'd bought with my own money, I felt more authentic than I had in years. Richard Sterling sat in the corner booth, looking every inch the polished executive. Silver hair perfectly styled, navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and the kind of confident posture that came from never having to doubt your place in the world. David. He stood and extended his hand. Thank you for coming. I ignored the handshake and slid into the booth across from him. Let's skip the pleasantries, Richard. You're sleeping with my wife. She's pregnant. What do you want? Richard's composure didn't crack, but something flickered behind his eyes, surprise maybe, that the quiet husband had developed a backbone. You're angry. I understand that. He leaned back, studying me like I was a balance sheet that didn't quite add up. But before we discuss the current situation, I need you to understand something about Victoria. Enlighten me. She's brilliant. Ruthless when she needs to be, but brilliant. Kane Industries was hemorrhaging money when her father retired. The board wanted to sell to Chinese investors, break up the company, liquidate everything. Richard's voice carried genuine admiration. Victoria saved it. She restructured the debt, streamlined operations, and turned it into one of the most profitable firms on the West Coast. Congratulations. Your girlfriend is a good CEO. Is there a point to this? The point, Richard said carefully, is that Victoria Kane operates in a world where personal relationships are always secondary to business necessities. She married you because you were stable, loyal, and unlikely to interfere with her professional obligations. The brutal honesty hit harder than any lie would have. And you? I married Patricia Blackwell because her father controls the Defense Appropriations Committee and Kane Industries needs those government contracts. Richard met my eyes without flinching. Neither of us pretends our marriages are love stories, David. But your affair with Victoria is? For the first time, Richard's mask slipped. Something vulnerable and almost desperate crossed his face. What Victoria and I have, it's complicated. Complicated. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what's not complicated? Keeping your hands off other men's wives. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The Singapore expansion, the federal contracts, the European market. We're building something that will employ thousands of people, generate billions in revenue. Personal feelings have to take a back seat to those kinds of responsibilities. Personal feelings, I repeated. Is that what you call my marriage? My wife carrying your child. Personal feelings. Richard leaned forward, and I saw something I hadn't expected, guilt. Real, genuine remorse that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised me. David, I never intended for this to happen. Victoria and I have worked together for 8 years. We've built something extraordinary, but it's always been professional. Then Singapore happened. What about Singapore? Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring into his untouched coffee. Are you familiar with Zhao Industries? I shook my head. Chinese manufacturing conglomerate. They'd been trying to acquire Kane Industries for 3 years, making increasingly aggressive offers. Thomas Kane, Victoria's father, had always refused, but when he retired, the board started listening. So Zhao Industries doesn't just want our contracts and infrastructure. They want our intellectual property, our client lists, our research and development. If they'd succeeded in acquiring us, they would have stripped everything valuable and moved operations to China. 15,000 American jobs would have disappeared overnight. Despite my anger, I found myself listening intently. Richard continued, his voice gaining intensity. The Singapore expansion was our countermove. If we could establish a manufacturing base in Southeast Asia and secure the government contracts Patricia's father oversees, we could compete with Chinese production costs while keeping jobs in America. Victoria never told me any of this. Because if word leaked to the wrong people, the whole strategy would collapse. We're talking about national security contracts, David. Defense Department projects that can't be outsourced to foreign entities. Richard's eyes were sharp, urgent. The Singapore deal wasn't just business, it was economic warfare. And that justifies your affair? Nothing justifies it. The admission seemed to cost him something. But maybe it explains it. Victoria and I spent 18-hour days for 3 weeks in Singapore, fighting battles that would determine the future of American manufacturing. We were under surveillance, our phones were tapped, we couldn't trust anyone except each other. I could see it now, the pressure cooker environment, 2 brilliant people locked in combat against forces beyond their control, finding comfort in the only person who understood the stakes. The night it happened, Richard continued, we'd just learned that Zhao Industries had attempted to bribe 3 board members. We realized we weren't just fighting a business acquisition. We were fighting a coordinated attack on American industry. We were scared, exhausted, and completely isolated from everyone we trusted. Except each other. Except each other. Richard's voice was barely above a whisper. It was wrong, David. I know it was wrong. But in that moment, we weren't CEO and co-chairman. We were just 2 people who'd discovered something that could destroy everything we'd worked to build. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of understanding. Not forgiveness. Never forgiveness, but understanding. Victoria and Richard hadn't been having a casual affair. They'd been thrown together in circumstances that would test anyone's judgment. So what now? I asked. Now the real battle begins. Richard pulled out his phone and showed me a news alert. Zhao Industries just announced they're filing a federal lawsuit alleging that Kane Industries engaged in illegal business practices during the Singapore expansion. My blood went cold. What kind of illegal practices? Bribery, industrial espionage, violation of foreign trade agreements. All completely false, but the investigation alone will freeze our assets and void our government contracts. Richard's voice was grim. If they succeed, Kane Industries won't just go bankrupt. Victoria could face federal charges. How is that possible? Because someone with inside knowledge has been feeding Zhao Industries confidential information about our Singapore operations. Richard met my eyes. Someone knew exactly which contracts to target, which government officials to approach, which legal vulnerabilities to exploit. The implication hit me like a freight train. You think someone at Kane Industries is working with Zhao? I don't think, David. I know. The question is who? My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Please come home. Richard told me about your lunch. We need to talk about what happens next. I showed Richard the message. She knows you're telling me this? Victoria insisted on it. She said you deserve to understand what we're really facing. Richard studied my expression. She also said something else. What? She said if anyone could help us figure out who the mole is, it would be you. I stared at him. Me? I'm just an accountant. You're an accountant who's had access to our financial records for 5 years. You know our systems, our procedures, our security protocols. Richard leaned forward. David, someone has been manipulating our books to make the Singapore expansion look illegal. They've been creating false documentation, hiding legitimate expenses, making bribes look like normal business costs. And you want me to find the evidence? I want you to help us save Victoria's life. The words hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about a cheating wife and her lover anymore. This was about corporate espionage, federal crimes, and a woman whose affair might be the least of her problems. Why should I help you? I asked quietly. Why should I lift a finger to save either of you? Richard was quiet for a long moment. Because despite everything that's happened, you love her. And because if Zhao Industries succeeds, they won't just destroy Victoria. They'll destroy everyone who's ever worked for Kane Industries. Including you. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial documents I recognized. Kane Industries' quarterly reports, the ones I'd helped prepare and file. But someone had altered them, changed numbers, inserted false transactions that made legitimate business expenses look like bribes. My God, I whispered. How long has this been going on? 2 years, maybe longer. Whoever did this has been setting up Victoria for a fall since before the Singapore expansion was even conceived. I thought about Victoria's texts, her desperation, her fear. She wasn't just scared about Richard finding out about the pregnancy. She was terrified of going to prison for crimes she didn't commit. If I help you, I said slowly, what happens to us? To our marriage? Richard's expression was unreadable. That's between you and Victoria. But David, the baby changes things. For all of us. What do you mean? Patricia and I have been trying to have children for 6 years. IVF, fertility treatments, 3 miscarriages. His voice cracked slightly. This baby, it might be the only child I ever have. The confession hit me like a physical blow. Richard Sterling wasn't just Victoria's affair partner. He was a man facing the same childless future I'd been dreading. So what are you asking me? I'm asking you to help us find the truth. And then, Richard hesitated. Then we'll figure out what comes next. Together. I stared at the altered financial documents, my mind racing. Someone had been planning Victoria's destruction for years, patiently building a case that would send her to federal prison. The affair, the pregnancy, the public scandal, all of it played perfectly into their hands. I need to think about this, I said finally. We don't have time to think. Richard's voice was urgent. The board meets tomorrow morning. If Zhao Industries' lawsuit proceeds, Kane Industries will be frozen pending investigation. Victoria will be arrested within the week. I stood up, the folder of evidence heavy in my hands. Richard, yes. If I do this, if I help you save her, I want something in return. Name it. When this is over, you disappear from her life. Completely. No more business partnerships, no more late nights, no more anything. You save your marriage, let me save mine. Richard studied my face for a long moment. And the baby? The baby deserves a father who's present, not one who's protecting his political reputation. I met his eyes. That father is going to be me. For the first time since I'd sat down, Richard Sterling looked genuinely surprised. You do that? Raise another man's child. I'd raise Victoria's child, I corrected. There's a difference. As I walked out of the Peninsula Beverly Hills, my phone was already buzzing with calls from Victoria. But I didn't answer. I had work to do, a mystery to solve, and a woman to save, whether she deserved it or not. The quiet accountant from Riverside was about to become the most dangerous person in corporate America. and Victoria Kane had no idea what was coming. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to the Kane Industries building in Century City, using the keycard Victoria had given me years ago for emergencies. The 40-story glass tower was mostly empty at 9 p.m., just security guards and the occasional workaholic burning the midnight oil. The executive accounting department occupied the entire 36th floor. I'd worked here for 3 years before Victoria convinced me to take the position at Hartwell & Associates, claiming it would be better for my career to have external perspective on her company's finances. Now I understood the real reason. She needed someone she could trust to review Kane Industries books without asking inconvenient questions. I settled into my old desk and began pulling up files. The Singapore expansion project involved 14 shell companies, 8 international banks, and enough legal complexity to hide a small army's worth of financial crimes. But I'd always been good with numbers, and numbers didn't lie, even when people tried to make them. David. I spun around to find Victoria standing in the doorway, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. She'd changed from her power suit into jeans and a sweater, and her face was free of makeup, revealing the exhaustion she usually hid behind professional armor. Richard said you might be here. She approached cautiously, like I was a wild animal that might bolt. Thank you for doing this. I'm not doing it for you, I said, turning back to the computer. I'm doing it because someone is trying to destroy innocent people's lives. David, about the baby. Don't. My voice was sharper than I'd intended. We're not discussing the baby tonight. Tonight we find whoever's been setting you up. Victoria nodded and pulled up a chair beside me. For the next 2 hours, we worked in tense silence, going through transaction records and cross-referencing them with the altered documents Richard had shown me. The pattern became clear around midnight. Look at this, I said, pointing to a series of transfers from the Singapore subsidiary. Someone's been creating mirror transactions, legitimate payments to contractors that are then duplicated and rerouted through shell companies. Victoria leaned closer, her shoulder brushing mine. I caught a hint of her perfume, the same scent she'd worn on our first date, and felt my resolve waver slightly. So it looks like we're paying bribes, she said, but we're actually just paying the same contractors twice. Exactly. The legitimate payments go to the real companies. The mirror payments go to fake companies with similar names. Zhao Industries probably has documentation of the fake payments, making it look like systemic bribery. But who has access to create these mirror transactions? I pulled up the authorization logs. Only 5 people have the clearance level necessary for this kind of manipulation. Victoria read the names over my shoulder. Richard, me, Patricia Morrison, that's our CFO, James Chin from legal, and... She paused. Thomas Kane. Your father? He retained emergency access when he retired. Standard procedure. Victoria's voice was troubled. But David, my father would never. People aren't always who we think they are, I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning neither of us wanted to acknowledge. David. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need you to know, what happened with Richard, it wasn't. I never meant for any of this to happen. Which part? The affair or getting caught? The affair. She turned in her chair to face me directly. For 5 years, I told myself our marriage was exactly what I needed. You were stable, kind, completely trustworthy. You never questioned my decisions or competed with my career. Sounds romantic. It wasn't romance. It was control. Victoria's honesty was brutal. I kept you in a box marked safe husband, because I was terrified of what might happen if I let myself need someone completely. And Richard was supposed to be the same kind of safe relationship. Business partners who understood each other's priorities, no messy emotions or personal complications. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Except it turns out you can't control your heart any more than you can control a hostile takeover. I stared at her, this woman I'd loved for 7 years, and saw something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Not of the federal investigation or corporate espionage, but of her own emotions. Are you in love with him? I asked. Victoria was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. I don't know, she said finally. I know I love working with him. I know we understand each other in ways that... She gestured helplessly. In ways I never thought possible. And me? You. Victoria's voice broke slightly. You're the man I married because I thought safe was enough. Because I thought I could build a life on gratitude and mutual respect without ever having to risk my heart. Was it? Enough. I thought so. Until Singapore, when I realized that safe wasn't protecting me from anything. It was just keeping me from living. The confession hit me like a physical blow. Not because it hurt, but because it was exactly what I'd been afraid to admit about myself. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. I nodded. The fertility treatments. The 3 years of trying. Were you happy during that time? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Were you happy with me? With our marriage? Or were you holding on to the idea of what we could become if we had children? I thought about those 3 years. The scheduled romance, the clinical approach to intimacy, the growing distance between us as each month brought disappointment. I was happy with the future I thought we were building, I admitted. But no, I wasn't happy with what we had. Neither was I. We sat in silence, surrounded by the evidence of corporate crimes and personal betrayals, and I realized something that should have terrified me. For the first time in years, Victoria and I were being completely honest with each other. The baby, I said quietly. Richard's baby. Do you want it? Victoria's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. Yes. God help me, yes. But not because it's his. Then why? Because it's mine. Because for the first time in my adult life, I've created something that isn't about business or strategy or maintaining control. Her voice was fierce, protective. This baby exists because I let my guard down for one night and remembered what it felt like to be human. And if I stayed, if we tried to make this work, then you'd be raising another man's child while watching me run a company with the man I had an affair with. Victoria met my eyes. That's not fair to any of us. What if Richard wasn't part of the equation? What do you mean? I told her about my conversation with Richard, about his agreement to disappear from her professional and personal life in exchange for my help. He agreed to that? Victoria looked stunned. He said Patricia is more important to his future than you are. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Hurt, relief, and something else I couldn't identify. And you'd be willing to stay? To raise the baby as yours? I'd be willing to try. But not as your safe husband who never questions your decisions. And not as someone you settled for because I was convenient. Then how? As your equal. Your partner in every sense of the word. Someone you chose because you can't imagine your life without them, not because they fit neatly into your business plan. Victoria stared at me for a long moment. David, I need to tell you something else. Something I should have told you years ago. What? The birth control. When you found out I was still taking it during our trying period? Victoria's voice was shaky. I wasn't being cautious about my body. I was terrified. Of what? Of being vulnerable. Of needing you in a way I couldn't control. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I wanted a baby with you desperately. But I was afraid that if we had a child together, if I let myself depend on you that completely, I'd lose myself entirely. The admission broke something open in my chest. So you sabotaged our chances. I sabotaged everything. Victoria wiped her eyes. I sabotaged our chances at children, at real intimacy, at building something meaningful together. Because I was more afraid of losing control than I was of losing you. And now I'm pregnant with another man's child, facing federal charges, and watching my life's work crumble around me. Victoria's laugh was hollow. Turns out trying to control everything just guarantees you'll lose what matters most. My computer chimed with an email notification. Patricia Morrison, the CFO, sending a message at 12:47 a.m. Patricia's working late, I observed. She's been pulling all-nighters since the Zhao lawsuit was filed, trying to organize our defense. Victoria leaned over to read the email. She's asking for the Singapore authorization codes. Something cold settled in my stomach. What authorization codes? The master codes for the shell company transactions. Only Richard and I have them. Victoria. My voice was urgent. If Patricia needs those codes to defend against the lawsuit, why isn't she asking Richard? Why is she emailing you at midnight? Victoria went very still. David, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Patricia Morrison has been working very late for 2 years. I'm thinking she has CFO-level access to every financial system in the company. And I'm thinking she just asked for the exact information she'd need to create more mirror transactions. Patricia's worked for Kane Industries for 12 years. She's completely loyal. To your father. Not to you. The implication hung in the air between us. Victoria pulled up Patricia's employment records, her face growing paler with each document. She was hired directly by my father in 2013. No interview process, no background check through HR. Victoria's voice was barely audible. He said she came highly recommended from a contact in Singapore. Singapore, I repeated. Victoria, I think your father's retirement wasn't voluntary. I think he's been planning to sell Kane Industries to Zhao from the beginning. That's impossible. He'd never. Wouldn't he? Think about it. He's 73 years old, his health is failing, and he's watching his daughter build an empire that's becoming too big for one family to control. I pulled up Thomas Kane's financial records. Victoria, your father has been liquidating his personal assets for the past 2 years. Everything except his Kane Industries stock. Victoria stared at the screen, her face white with shock. He's positioning himself for a buyout. Not just a buyout. A hostile takeover that destroys your reputation and removes you as an obstacle. My mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been too blind to see. The fertility treatments, the false hope, the emotional distance. It all kept you focused on personal problems instead of corporate threats. You think my father orchestrated our marriage problems? I think your father understood that a distracted, emotionally vulnerable CEO would be easier to remove when the time came. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Need those codes ASAP. Federal investigators are here. They have a warrant. David. Victoria's voice was sharp with panic. What do we do? I stood up, decision crystallizing in my mind. We do something your father never expected. What? We fight back. Together. For the first time in our 7-year relationship, Victoria Kane looked at me like I was more than her safe, convenient husband. She looked at me like I was the most dangerous man in the room. And she was right. We had 30 minutes before the federal investigators reached the 36th floor. Patricia's warrant would give them access to every file, every transaction record, every piece of evidence we'd uncovered, and every piece of evidence that could incriminate Victoria. We need to copy everything, I said, pulling out a portable drive. Every mirror transaction, every altered document, every authorization log. Victoria was already moving, her business instincts overriding her emotional turmoil. David, there's something else. Something I should have told you earlier. What? The Singapore trip. When Richard and I. She hesitated, then pressed forward with characteristic determination. It wasn't the first time we'd been alone together. My father had been sending us on business trips for 6 months before that. Always together, always to high-pressure situations. I looked up from the computer. What are you saying? I'm saying I think my father was orchestrating opportunities for Richard and me to get involved. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think he wanted you to have an affair? I think he wanted me emotionally compromised, distracted, vulnerable to making mistakes. Victoria's voice was bitter. A CEO having an affair with her business partner is a liability. It gives the board grounds for removal. But Richard agreed to disappear from your life. He said Patricia was more important. David. Victoria's voice was strange. Richard Sterling isn't married to Patricia Blackwell anymore. I stopped typing. What? They divorced 6 months ago. Quietly, sealed records, no media coverage. Victoria pulled up a legal database on her phone. Patricia kept the name for political reasons, but the marriage ended last February. My mind raced backward through the timeline. Richard's lunch, his confession about trying to have children with Patricia, his emotional breakdown about the baby being his only chance at fatherhood. He lied to me, I whispered. David, if Richard isn't married, if he doesn't need to protect his political connections. Victoria's face went white with realization. Then why would he agree to disappear from my life? The answer hit us both at the same time. Victoria grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Call him, she said urgently. Call Richard right now. I dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. Try his office. Mr. Sterling is unavailable, his assistant said when I called the main line. He's in an emergency board meeting with Mr. Thomas Kane. Victoria and I stared at each other across the desk. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a picture so devastating I could barely process it. Your father and Richard, I said slowly. They've been working together this whole time. The affair wasn't a mistake, Victoria whispered. It was planned. I thought about Richard's performance at lunch. The guilt, the confession about pressure and isolation. The way he'd made their relationship sound like an inevitable result of circumstances beyond their control. Singapore, I said. Victoria, what if Richard manipulated the situation? What if he created the pressure that led to your affair? Victoria pulled up the Singapore trip records. The acquisition timeline, the Zhao Industries threats, the board pressure. Richard was feeding me information about all of it. He was my primary source for. She stopped, her face going ashen. Oh God. David, what if half of what he told me about the Chinese threats wasn't even true? What if the affair was supposed to destroy your marriage and your judgment, making you easier to remove as CEO? And what if, Victoria said quietly, the pregnancy wasn't an accident either? The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I thought about Richard's confession regarding his divorce, his claims about fertility problems, his emotional reaction to the news of Victoria's pregnancy. Birth control, I said suddenly. Victoria, were you on birth control during Singapore? Of course. I've been on birth control since. She stopped, her eyes widening with horror. David, the night it happened, Richard brought wine to my hotel room. We'd been working for 18 hours, and I was exhausted, emotional about the board pressure. How much did you drink? I don't remember. I remember feeling dizzy, more affected by the alcohol than I should have been. Victoria's voice was barely audible. I remember waking up the next morning and barely remembering what happened. He drugged you. He drugged me and got me pregnant deliberately. Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. David, this baby. What if this baby was never about love or passion or even weakness? What if it was just another business strategy? I reached for her hand without thinking, and for the first time in months, she didn't pull away. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling. We need to get out of here, I said. If Richard and your father are working together, if they've been planning this for months. Years, Victoria corrected, pulling up more files. David, look at this. The hiring records, the board appointments, the strategic partnerships. They've been positioning themselves to take over Kane Industries for at least 3 years. And now they have everything they need. A CEO compromised by an affair, a federal investigation that will freeze company assets, and a pregnancy that proves Victoria Kane can't be trusted to maintain professional boundaries. Victoria's phone buzzed with another text from Patricia. Asterisk Victoria, where are you? The investigators are asking specifically for you and David. They have your personal financial records. Asterisk. They have our personal records? I felt the walls closing in. Victoria, what's in our personal accounts that could? I stopped, cold realization washing over me. 3 years ago, Victoria had insisted on combining our bank accounts, claiming it would simplify our finances. I'd been grateful for the gesture, seeing it as a sign of trust and commitment. The fertility treatments, I said slowly. All those payments to specialists, to clinics, to experimental procedures. They weren't just about having a baby. What do you mean? I mean, someone with access to our combined finances could make it look like we were paying for illegal fertility procedures. Black market treatments, unregulated hormones, maybe even bribes to foreign adoption agencies, Victoria finished. David, if they've been documenting our fertility struggles alongside the Singapore expansion, they could claim we were so desperate for a child that we engaged in international adoption fraud, making you emotionally unstable and criminally liable, and making you an accomplice. The elevator dinged in the distance, followed by the sound of multiple voices and heavy footsteps. The federal investigators had arrived. David, listen to me very carefully. Victoria's voice was urgent but controlled. There's something I never told you about our prenup. Our prenup, the agreement you signed before our wedding. There's a clause that protects you if I'm ever charged with federal crimes. I stared at her. What kind of clause? Complete financial immunity. If I go down, you keep everything. The house, the accounts, your business assets. You're protected. Victoria, why are you telling me this? Because, she said, standing up and moving toward the emergency stairwell, you need to know that saving me isn't worth destroying your life. What are you doing? I'm making sure you have a choice. Victoria stopped at the stairwell door. David, everything that's happened, the marriage, the fertility struggles, even my affair with Richard, it's all been orchestrated to destroy me professionally and personally. But you were collateral damage. You don't have to go down with this ship. Victoria, the man you married 7 years ago, the one who needed stability and safety and a convenient husband who wouldn't ask too many questions, she's gone. The woman standing here now, the one facing federal charges for crimes she didn't commit, carrying a baby that might have been conceived through assault, she's not the same person. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer. I'm not the same person either, I said quietly. I know, which is why I'm giving you the chance to walk away with your integrity intact. I looked at this woman I'd loved for 7 years, really looked at her. Not Victoria Kane, the CEO, not the millionaire wife who'd elevated my social status, not even the cheating spouse who'd shattered my trust. I saw the woman who'd spent 3 years sabotaging her own chances at happiness because she was afraid of being vulnerable. The woman who'd been manipulated and used by the 2 men she'd trusted most. The woman who was offering to sacrifice herself to protect me. "Victoria," I said, moving toward the stairwell door. "Do you remember what I told you 7 years ago when you were worried about your father's approval of our engagement? You said love wasn't about being safe. You said it was about choosing to trust someone with the power to destroy you. And what did you say?" I said that sounded terrifying. "And now?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Now it sounds like the only thing worth fighting for." The stairwell door opened, and I heard Patricia Morrison's voice in the hallway. "They're in the accounting department. Victoria and David Morrison. They've been here all night." I took Victoria's hand, and for the first time in our relationship, we ran toward danger together instead of away from it. But as we reached the parking garage, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. *, David, this is Richard. Meet me at the peninsula in 1 hour. Come alone, or Victoria goes to prison tonight. I have evidence that will save her, but only if you do exactly what I say. *. Victoria read the message over my shoulder. "It's a trap," she said. "I know. You can't trust anything he says. I know that too. Then why are you thinking about going?" I looked at her, this brilliant, flawed, impossible woman who'd just offered to sacrifice everything to protect me, and realized that somewhere in the chaos of betrayal and corporate espionage and federal investigations, I'd found something I'd been missing for years. I'd found my courage. "Because," I said, "Richard Sterling has no idea who he's been playing with. He thinks David Morrison is the same grateful, passive husband who signed a prenup without reading it and accepted fertility problems without question. And he's not. He's not." I started the car, decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. But Richard's about to find out exactly who David Morrison really is. As we drove through the empty streets of Los Angeles, Victoria reached over and took my hand. "David, whatever happens next, thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, not the convenient wife or the cheating spouse. Just me." I squeezed her hand, and for the first time in our 7-year relationship, I felt like we were truly married. Which made what was about to happen even more devastating. The Peninsula Beverly Hills looked different at 2 a.m. The polished lobby felt like a mausoleum, all marble and silence and the weight of secrets that money couldn't wash clean. Richard was waiting in the same booth where he'd ambushed me 12 hours earlier, but this time he wasn't alone. Thomas Kane sat beside him, looking every inch the patriarch who'd built an empire from nothing. At 73, Victoria's father still carried himself with the authority of a man who'd never lost a battle he'd chosen to fight. "David." Thomas stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." I ignored the handshake and slid into the booth across from them. "Let's skip the pleasantries. You've been planning to destroy your own daughter for years. What do you want?" Thomas's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Richard told me you'd developed a spine. Interesting timing. Where's the evidence that's supposed to save Victoria?" Richard slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a video file, security footage from the Kane Industries building, time-stamped from tonight. "Press play," Richard said quietly. The video showed Victoria and me in the accounting department, but the angle made it look like we were deleting files rather than copying them. The timestamp had been altered to show us arriving 3 hours before we'd actually entered the building. "Destruction of evidence during a federal investigation," Thomas said matter-of-factly. "That's 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Each." My blood turned to ice. "This is fabricated." "Of course it is. But the federal investigators don't know that." Richard leaned forward. "David, Victoria is going to be arrested in approximately 2 hours. The charges will include corporate espionage, bribery, and now obstruction of justice. Unless you help us clean up this mess in a way that protects everyone's interests." Thomas pulled out a folder and set it between us. "David, you've been married to my daughter for 5 years. You know her better than anyone. Would you say Victoria Kane is capable of running a multi-billion-dollar corporation while pregnant and facing federal charges?" The question was a trap, and I knew it. Victoria is the most capable person I've ever met. "Capable, yes. But stable?" Thomas's voice was deceptively gentle. The emotional volatility, the affair with her business partner, the destructive decision-making. Does that sound like someone who should be making decisions that affect thousands of employees? It sounds like someone who's been systematically undermined by people she trusted. Or someone who's having a breakdown. Richard's voice carried just enough sympathy to make it sound believable. David, I need to tell you something about the pregnancy. Don't. Victoria called me 3 days ago. She wanted to terminate the pregnancy. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked across the restaurant, suddenly needing air, space, distance from these men who wielded truth like weapons. She changed her mind, Richard continued. But the fact that she considered it, given her public statements about wanting children. That's enough. My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Is it? Thomas leaned forward. David, my daughter is brilliant, but she's also unstable. The fertility struggles, the marriage problems, the affair. It's all evidence of someone who's lost control of her personal life. And when someone loses control personally, they lose control professionally. So you decided to destroy her before she could destroy the company. I decided to save Kane Industries from becoming another corporate casualty of personal drama. Thomas's honesty was brutal. David, in 6 months, Victoria will be in federal prison or a mental health facility. The company will be seized, liquidated, and sold to foreign investors. 15,000 Americans will lose their jobs. Unless you take control. Unless someone with clear judgment takes control. Thomas gestured toward the folder. Richard and I have a proposal. I opened the folder, though I already knew what I'd find. A resignation letter signed by Victoria, a medical evaluation declaring her unfit for corporate leadership, and a transition plan that would make Thomas interim CEO with Richard as his successor. All we need, Richard said quietly, is your signature as her husband, confirming that Victoria is voluntarily stepping down due to personal and health concerns. And if I refuse, then Victoria goes to prison tonight, and you go with her. Thomas's voice was ice cold. The altered security footage, the financial irregularities in your joint accounts, the evidence of adoption fraud. It's all documented and ready for the federal investigators. You've been planning this for years. I've been protecting my life's work from being destroyed by someone who inherited power without earning wisdom. Thomas stood up, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. David, I don't enjoy this. Victoria is my daughter, and I love her. But sometimes love means making impossible choices. Like drugging her and getting her pregnant. Richard flinched, but Thomas's expression didn't change. Like recognizing when someone you love has become a danger to themselves and everyone around them. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. David, where are you? The investigators are here. They have a warrant for your arrest too. Thomas read the message over my shoulder. 2 hours, David. Maybe less. Why me? I asked. Why do you need my signature? Because, Richard said quietly, Victoria trusts you. If her husband confirms that she's stepping down voluntarily for health reasons, the board will accept it. The federal investigation will be limited to the Singapore expansion, which we can contain. And if I don't sign? Then you watch the woman you love go to prison for crimes you know she didn't commit. Thomas's voice was gentle, almost paternal. David, you're not built for federal prison. You're a good man who got caught up in something bigger than himself. Sign the papers, and you walk away with your dignity intact. What about the baby? What about it? Richard's voice was carefully neutral. You're the father. Don't you want? David. Richard's voice was sharp. I need you to understand something. The baby Victoria is carrying, it might not be mine. The world tilted on its axis. What? The timing is complicated. Singapore was 3 months ago, but Victoria and I had been working closely for 6 months before that. There were other opportunities, other nights when we both drank too much and let our guard down. You're saying the baby could be mine? I'm saying the paternity is uncertain. And given the circumstances of conception, given the drugging allegations. Richard's voice was pained. Victoria asked me not to tell you this, but she's planning to terminate the pregnancy anyway. That's not true. Call her, Thomas said quietly. Ask her yourself. My hands were shaking as I dialed Victoria's number. She answered on the first ring. David, thank God. Where are you? Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. What? The baby. Are you planning to end the pregnancy? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for an eternity. David, where are you? Who are you with? Answer the question. I. Victoria's voice was barely audible. I made an appointment. For tomorrow morning. The words hit me like bullets. Why? Because I can't bring a child into this chaos. Because I don't even know for certain who the father is. Because. Her voice broke. Because I'm going to prison, David. And you're going with me if you don't get away from me right now. Victoria. The investigators found something in our accounts. Something that makes us both look guilty of adoption fraud. David, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Her voice was urgent, desperate. Whatever my father and Richard are offering you, take it. Sign whatever they want you to sign. Save yourself. I'm not abandoning you. You're not abandoning me. You're accepting the reality that I was never worthy of the sacrifice you're trying to make. Victoria's voice was steady now, resolved. David, for 5 years I treated you like a convenient accessory to my life. I kept you in a box marked safe husband, and took your love for granted. The least I can do now is make sure my selfishness doesn't destroy your future. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you enough to let you go. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling something fundamental break inside my chest. Thomas was watching me with what might have been genuine sympathy. David, Victoria is protecting you the only way she knows how. By pushing you away before you can be destroyed alongside her. She's terminating the pregnancy. Yes, because she believes she's going to prison. Because she is going to prison, Richard corrected. Unless you sign these papers and help us transition the company leadership peacefully. I looked down at the resignation letter, at Victoria's forged signature, at the medical evaluation that would declare the most brilliant woman I'd ever known mentally incompetent. If I sign this, what happens to her? She receives the medical care she needs, Thomas said. Private facility, comfortable accommodations, treatment for depression and anxiety. She's not depressed or anxious. She's being framed. David, Richard's voice was gentle. Victoria Kane drugged herself 3 months ago and had unprotected sex with her business partner. That's not the behavior of someone in control of her faculties. You drugged her. I brought wine to her hotel room. She made the choice to drink it, just like she made the choice to invite me in. Richard met my eyes. I'm not proud of what happened, but I'm not solely responsible for it either. The gaslighting was masterful, layered with just enough truth to make me question my own perceptions. Had Victoria been drinking more during the Singapore trip? Had she been making increasingly reckless decisions in the months leading up to her affair? 20 minutes, Thomas said, checking his watch. The investigators will be here soon. My phone buzzed with another text from Victoria. David, I need you to know something. The fertility problems, the sabotaged birth control, all of it. I did it because I was afraid of needing you too much. I was afraid that if we had a child together, I'd lose myself completely. I'm sorry I was such a coward. I'm sorry I wasted the love you offered me. Please don't waste your life trying to save someone who never deserved saving. I read the message twice, then looked up at Thomas and Richard. These men who'd orchestrated years of manipulation, who'd destroyed a marriage through patience and precision, who'd driven a brilliant woman to the edge of breakdown through systematic psychological warfare. The signature, Thomas said quietly. We need it now. I picked up the pen, and in that moment, sitting in the Peninsula Beverly Hills at 2:47 a.m., I realized that Victoria Kane wasn't the only one who'd been living in a box for the past 5 years. I'd been the grateful husband, the safe choice, the man who never questioned or challenged or fought back. But watching these men try to destroy the woman I loved had finally shown me who I really was underneath all that manufactured gratitude. I was David Morrison. I'd built a business from nothing, earned every dollar I'd ever made, and commanded respect through competence rather than inheritance. And I was done being underestimated. Thomas, I said quietly, setting down the pen without signing. I have a question. What? How long have you been planning to steal your daughter's company? Thomas's expression didn't change. I'm saving my company from. Your company? I stood up, and for the first time in the conversation, both men looked genuinely surprised. Kane Industries has been Victoria's company for 5 years. She saved it from bankruptcy, tripled its revenue, and turned it into one of the most profitable firms on the West Coast. And you've been planning to steal it from her since the day she took control. David, be reasonable. Reasonable? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know what's reasonable? What's reasonable is that in about 10 minutes, federal investigators are going to burst through that door looking for me. And when they do, they're going to find me sitting with 2 men who've been manipulating financial records and fabricating evidence for years. Richard went pale. David, what are you doing? I'm choosing sides. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message. And I'm choosing Victoria. The text was to Tommy Chun, Hotel Peninsula Beverly Hills. Booth in back corner. Bring federal backup. Now. Thomas Kane stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. David, you're making a mistake that will destroy your life. Maybe, I said. But at least it will be my mistake to make. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt truly free. The silence in the Peninsula booth stretched like a taut wire. Thomas Kane stared at my phone, calculating odds and escape routes with the cold precision of a man who'd built empires on other people's dreams. David, Richard said carefully, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Am I? Then explain why 2 successful businessmen are sitting in a hotel at 3 a.m. trying to force a signature from someone they've spent years treating like an irrelevant accessory. Thomas leaned back, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely impressed. You know what, David? I underestimated you. We all did. Including Victoria? Especially Victoria. Thomas's smile was sharp as a blade. Did you really think she's been as helpless in all this as she's pretended to be? Something cold settled in my stomach. What do you mean? I mean, Thomas said quietly, my daughter has been playing a much deeper game than you realize. Richard was watching me with something that might have been pity. David, there's something Victoria never told you about the Singapore expansion. Such as the fact that it was her idea from the beginning. The shell companies, the mirror transactions, the federal contracts. All of it was Victoria's strategy to position Kane Industries for a buyout. The words hit me like physical blows. That's impossible. Is it? Thomas pulled out his tablet and showed me a series of emails. Victoria's name in the sender field, detailed plans for the exact financial manipulations we'd discovered tonight. David, my daughter has been orchestrating her own downfall for 2 years. Why would she do that? Because, Richard said gently, Victoria Kane never wanted to run Kane Industries. She wanted to sell it for enough money to disappear completely. I stared at the emails, my mind reeling. The timestamps showed Victoria initiating contact with Zhao Industries 18 months ago. Not defending against their acquisition attempts, inviting them. The fertility treatments, Thomas continued. The marriage problems, the emotional distance. All of it was designed to give her a cover story for increasingly erratic behavior. And the affair? Was supposed to be the final straw. The scandal that would force the board to remove her, making the sale look like a necessity rather than a choice. Richard's voice was pained. David, Victoria seduced me. Not the other way around. You said you drugged her. I said I brought wine to her hotel room. Victoria asked me to bring it. She had already researched how much alcohol it would take to create plausible deniability for what she wanted to happen. My phone buzzed with a message from Tommy Chun, on our way. Federal agents 5 minutes out. Whatever you're doing, be careful. 5 minutes. 5 minutes until backup arrived to arrest the men I'd thought were villains, while the woman I'd thought was a victim might be the mastermind behind everything. The pregnancy, I said quietly. Was that planned too? Thomas and Richard exchanged a look I couldn't read. David, Thomas said carefully, there's something else you need to know about the baby. What? Victoria isn't 12 weeks pregnant. She's 16 weeks. The math hit me like a freight train. 16 weeks ago was a month before Singapore. A month when Victoria and I had been going through another round of fertility treatments, when we'd been trying desperately for the child we'd wanted for years. The baby is mine, I whispered. We think so, yes. Richard's voice was barely audible. The Singapore affair happened after Victoria was already pregnant. It was cover, David. A way to make the pregnancy look like another consequence of her emotional breakdown. She's been lying to me about everything. Not everything. Thomas leaned forward, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. Victoria loves you, David. That was never part of the plan. Then what was? The plan was for Victoria to destroy her own reputation, sell Kane Industries to Zhao for $8 billion, and disappear with enough money to start over anywhere in the world. Thomas's voice was heavy with something like regret. She never expected to fall in love with her convenient husband. And when she did, she started trying to protect you. The birth control, the sabotaged fertility treatments, the emotional distance. All of it was Victoria trying to keep you from getting too attached to a life she was planning to destroy. I thought about Victoria's confession in the office, her admission that she'd been afraid of needing me too much. Her offer to let me walk away with my dignity intact. her insistence that I didn't deserve to be destroyed alongside her. The federal investigation, I said slowly. That's real. That's real. But Victoria invited it. Richard showed me another email. She's been feeding information to federal investigators for months, building a case against Kane Industries that would force a sale. She's been destroying her father's company on purpose. No, Thomas said quietly. She's been destroying my company to save herself from inheriting something she never wanted. My phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. Don't answer it, Richard warned. But I needed to hear her voice. I needed to understand who Victoria Kane really was underneath all the layers of deception. David. Victoria sounded exhausted, broken. Please tell me you're not with my father and Richard. I need you to be honest with me about something. David, there's no time. Is the baby mine? The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. Victoria. Is the baby mine? David, please come home. We need to leave Los Angeles tonight. Answer the question. Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. The baby is yours. And the Singapore affair? Was the biggest mistake of my life. But not the way I thought. Another long silence. David, where are you? Peninsula Beverly Hills. With your father and Richard. Learning about shell companies and planned bankruptcies and 2 years of lies. Oh God. Victoria's voice broke completely. David, you need to get out of there. Right now. Why? Because the federal agents who are coming for you aren't really federal agents. The world stopped. Thomas and Richard were watching me with expressions I couldn't read. What do you mean? I mean, Zhao Industries has been paying people to impersonate federal investigators. The warrants, the evidence collection, the arrest orders, it's all fake, David. They're trying to kidnap us. I looked at Thomas and Richard, and suddenly understood why they'd seemed so calm about federal agents arriving at a hotel in the middle of the night. You knew, I said. We've been trying to save your life, Thomas replied. Victoria's plan wasn't just to sell Kane Industries. She was planning to frame you for the financial crimes and disappear while you went to prison. That's not true, isn't it? Richard slid another document across the table. David, look at your signature on these financial transfers. When did you authorize moving $3 million to an offshore account? I stared at the signature. It looked exactly like mine, but I'd never seen the document before. Victoria's been forging your signature for months, Thomas said gently. Building a paper trail that makes you look like an accomplice to her crimes. No. My voice was hoarse. Victoria wouldn't. David. Victoria's voice was urgent in my ear. Listen to me very carefully. My father and Richard have been planning to kill us both. The fake federal agents, the forged documents, all of it is designed to make us disappear quietly. Victoria, your father is sitting right here. He can hear everything you're saying. Good. Then maybe he'll finally tell you the truth about why he really wants Kane Industries back. Thomas leaned closer to the phone. Victoria, sweetheart, it's time to stop running. Go to hell, Dad. Victoria. Thomas's voice was patient, paternal. David deserves to know the truth about Zhao Industries. What truth? I demanded. That they're not Chinese investors trying to acquire American companies, Thomas said quietly. They're American intelligence operatives trying to prevent those companies from being sold to actual Chinese interests. The revelation hit me like a tsunami. What? Kane Industries has defense contracts worth $40 billion over the next decade. If those contracts fell into foreign hands. Thomas spread his hands. Victoria's sale to Zhao Industries wasn't corporate espionage, David. It was treason. That's not true. Victoria's voice was fierce through the phone. David, don't listen to him. Zhao Industries is exactly what they appear to be. Then why, Richard interrupted, did you meet with Chinese military officials in Singapore? Silence from the phone. Victoria, I said quietly. David, I need you to trust me. One more time. Can you do that? I looked at Thomas and Richard, at the documents and emails and evidence of months of planning. I thought about 5 years of marriage to a woman who'd kept me in a carefully constructed box, who'd made every major decision without consulting me, who'd treated our relationship like another business transaction to be managed. And I thought about the woman who'd broken down in the accounting office tonight, who'd offered to sacrifice herself to protect me, who'd been carrying my child while I accused her of betraying me with another man. Where are you? I asked. Safe house. FBI protection. Real FBI, not the fake ones who are coming for you. Victoria, I don't know what to believe anymore. Then believe this, she said, her voice breaking. I love you. I've loved you since the day you walked me through that audit and treated me like a person instead of a balance sheet. Everything I've done wrong, every lie I've told, every way I've hurt you, it was because I was too afraid to trust that love. And now I'm more afraid of losing you than I am of losing everything else." Tommy Chen's voice echoed from the hotel lobby. "Federal agents. Everyone stay where you are." Thomas smiled. "Well, David. Decision time." I looked at my phone, at Victoria's number still connected. At the men who claimed to be saving me from the woman who claimed to love me. At 5 years of a marriage built on carefully managed half-truths and 2 hours of honest confession that might be the biggest lie of all. "Victoria? Yes. I'm coming home." I stood up, and Thomas Kane's expression shifted from paternal concern to something much colder. "David, if you walk out of here, you'll be dead within the hour." "Maybe. But I'd rather die fighting for something real than live safely with a lie." As I walked toward the lobby, Richard called after me. "David, the baby might not even be yours." I turned back one last time. "Richard, if Victoria's been playing me for 5 years, if everything between us has been a manipulation, if she's really planning to frame me for treason and disappear with billions of dollars." I paused. "Then I'm about to get exactly what I deserve. And if you're wrong, if she really does love you, then I'm about to get something I never thought I deserved." I walked into the Peninsula lobby to find Tommy Chen leading a team of actual federal agents toward the restaurant. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Victoria Kane, standing by the entrance in jeans and a sweater, her hand protectively over her stomach, tears streaming down her face. "David," she whispered. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know. The baby is ours. And if you can't forgive me, if this is too much." I took her hand, felt the warmth of her fingers against mine, and realized that I'd finally learned the difference between love and convenience. "Then we'll figure it out together. Even if I really am guilty of treason? Especially then." For the first time in 5 years, Victoria Kane looked at me like I was the most dangerous man in the world. And she was right. The FBI safe house in Malibu looked like any other beachfront rental. White walls, ocean views, and the kind of casual luxury that disguised its real purpose. Agent Sarah Martinez led Victoria and me through the security briefing, while Tommy Chen coordinated with the federal task force that had been building a case against what they'd initially believed was a Chinese acquisition conspiracy. "Mrs. Kane," Agent Martinez said, settling into the chair across from us, "we need you to walk us through the timeline one more time. Everything from your first contact with Zhao Industries to tonight's events at the Peninsula." Victoria glanced at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine uncertainty. For 5 years, she'd been the most confident person in any room. Now, holding my hand in a federal safe house while agents built a case that could send her to prison for treason, she looked vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. "Agent Martinez," I said, "before Victoria explains anything, I need to know something. The agents who came to Kane Industries tonight, were they real?" "They were real FBI agents following falsified warrants." Martinez pulled out a tablet. "Someone with high-level access has been creating authentic-looking federal documents for months. Search warrants, arrest orders, evidence collection protocols, all bearing genuine FBI authorization codes." "How is that possible?" "Because," Victoria said quietly, "someone inside the FBI has been feeding information to whoever's really behind this." Martinez nodded grimly. "Mrs. Kane is correct. We've been tracking a leak in the federal investigative system for 8 months. Someone has been using real FBI resources to conduct fake investigations." "Zhao Industries?" "No. That's what we thought initially, but Zhao Industries is exactly what they appear to be. A legitimate Chinese manufacturing company interested in acquiring American assets." Martinez swiped through files on her tablet. "The real conspiracy is much closer to home." Victoria's grip on my hand tightened. "Agent Martinez, show him the financial records." Martinez hesitated. "Mrs. Kane, you understand that what I'm about to show your husband could be used as evidence against you?" "I understand." "Victoria," I said, "what aren't you telling me?" "Everything." Victoria turned to face me fully. "David, I need you to know that every word I spoke tonight was true. The fertility struggles, the fear of vulnerability, the way I kept you in a box because I was afraid of needing you too much, all of it was real. But it wasn't the whole truth." Victoria looked at Agent Martinez, who nodded and pulled up a new set of files. "David Morrison," Martinez said, How familiar are you with your wife's business activities prior to your marriage? I knew she was a vice president at Kane Industries. I helped with the audit when they bought the strip mall where my office was located. Did you know that strip mall purchase was fake? The world tilted. What? Kane Industries never bought that property. The entire transaction was staged to give Victoria a reason to meet you. Martinez showed me the real estate records. The building was purchased by a shell company controlled by Thomas Kane 6 months before Victoria walked into your office. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. David, I didn't come to Riverside to conduct an audit. I came to find you. Why? Because, Agent Martinez said, David Morrison was the only accountant in Southern California who'd ever successfully uncovered a complex money laundering operation. The memory hit me like a freight train. 3 years before I'd met Victoria, I'd been hired to audit a small shipping company in Long Beach. What I'd found was a multi-million-dollar operation funneling drug money through legitimate business accounts. My testimony had sent 6 people to federal prison. The Morrison investigation, Victoria continued, was the only successful prosecution of Chinese money laundering in California. The FBI had been tracking similar operations for years without making any progress. Until you found patterns that no one else had seen, Martinez added. Mr. Morrison, your work on that case made you a very valuable asset. Asset to whom? Victoria took a shaky breath. To me. David, I've been working for the FBI for 7 years. The confession hit me like lightning. You're an undercover agent? I'm a corporate intelligence specialist. The FBI recruited me when I was 24, right after my MBA. My job was to infiltrate companies suspected of foreign espionage and build cases from the inside. I stared at her, this woman I'd been married to for 5 years, and realized I'd never known her at all. Kane Industries, I said slowly, was suspected of being a front for Chinese intelligence operations. My father had been taking money from foreign investors for decades, and the FBI needed someone inside the company to prove it. So you seduced me to help with the investigation? No. Victoria's voice was fierce. David, the FBI identified you as someone who could help uncover financial crimes, but they never asked me to marry you. They never asked me to build a life with you. Then why did you? Because 3 weeks into the audit, I realized I'd rather spend the rest of my life helping you balance books for small businesses in Riverside than spend another day living the lie I'd been living for the Bureau. Agent Martinez cleared her throat. Mrs. Kane, perhaps you should explain the Singapore operation. Victoria nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. The Singapore expansion was my idea, but not for the reasons anyone thinks. I discovered that my father wasn't just taking money from Chinese investors. He was actively selling defense secrets to them. The shell companies were designed to trace where the money was really going. Every fake transaction, every mirror payment, every suspicious transfer, I was building a map of my father's espionage network. And Richard Sterling has been working for Chinese intelligence for 5 years. His marriage to Patricia Blackwell wasn't about political connections. It was about accessing Defense Department contracts. My mind was racing, trying to process 7 years of lies and revelations. The affair in Singapore was me trying to get close enough to Richard to access his communications with his handlers. Victoria's voice was raw with pain. David, I had to make him believe I was emotionally compromised, that I was vulnerable to manipulation. By sleeping with him. By making him think I was sleeping with him. Victoria looked at Agent Martinez. Show him the medical records. Martinez pulled up a new file. Mrs. Kane has been taking fertility drugs for the past year, but not for the reasons you think. The hormones create symptoms that mimic early pregnancy. I was never pregnant with Richard's child, Victoria said quietly. I used fake pregnancy tests and hormone manipulation to make him believe I was carrying his baby. Why? Because Richard Sterling's greatest weakness is his desire for a legacy. He's been trying to have children for years, and the possibility of a son or daughter was enough to make him careless about operational security. Agent Martinez showed me transcripts of conversations between Richard and his Chinese contacts. Mrs. Kane's fake pregnancy prompted Mr. Sterling to request early extraction to China. Those communications led us to the entire West Coast espionage network. The real federal investigation, Victoria continued, wasn't about Kane Industries selling secrets to China. It was about using Kane Industries as bait to catch everyone who'd been buying those secrets. And your father has been feeding information to Chinese intelligence for 8 years, but not willingly. Victoria's voice was pained. They've been blackmailing him with evidence of financial crimes he committed in the 1990s. So he's not the villain. He's a victim who became an accomplice. Victoria looked at me with something like desperation. David, everything I told you about my father orchestrating our marriage problems, about him wanting to steal the company, I believed all of that was true until tonight. What changed? Agent Martinez answered. 3 hours ago, Thomas Kane walked into the FBI field office and confessed everything. The blackmail, the forced cooperation, the years of feeding classified information to foreign agents. He turned himself in? He turned himself in, Victoria said, because he found out about the fake federal agents tonight. He realized that Richard and his handlers were planning to kill us both and make it look like a murder-suicide. The final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The Peninsula Hotel meeting was Richard's attempt to get you away from FBI protection so his people could eliminate both of you quietly. Agent Martinez's expression was grim. Mr. Morrison, you and your wife have been targets for elimination for the past 6 months. Because we were getting too close to the truth? Because Victoria's investigation was about to expose the entire network. Victoria squeezed my hand. David, the fertility treatments, the marriage problems, all of it, I was trying to protect you by creating distance. I thought if you seemed less important to the investigation, you'd be safer. Instead, you were both drawing more attention, Martinez added. A couple having marriage problems while conducting a major financial investigation. It looked suspicious to everyone involved. So the affair was fake, the pregnancy was fake, but the marriage problems were real. The marriage problems were real, Victoria confirmed, because I was terrified that my cover would get you killed. I looked at this woman I'd loved for 7 years, really looked at her. Not Victoria Kane, the CEO, not the millionaire wife, not even the federal agent who'd been living a lie for most of her adult life. I saw someone who'd been trying to save my life by pushing me away, who'd sacrificed her own happiness to protect mine. Victoria, I said quietly, are you really pregnant now? With my baby? Yes. Her voice was steady. That part was never fake. The timing, the paternity, the way I felt when I saw those 2 pink lines, that was the most real thing that's happened to me in years. And your appointment tomorrow morning? Was to confirm the pregnancy and start prenatal care. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. David, when I thought I was going to prison, when I thought Richard's people were going to kill us both, the only thing I could think about was that I'd wasted 3 years being afraid to have your baby. Agent Martinez cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. What kind of situation? Richard Sterling has taken Thomas Kane hostage at Kane Industries. He's demanding that Victoria surrender herself in exchange for her father's life. Victoria was already standing. How long do we have? He's given us 2 hours. Agent Martinez, I said, what happens if Victoria surrenders herself? Mr. Sterling will kill them both. His extraction to China depends on eliminating all witnesses to his espionage activities. And if she doesn't, he kills Thomas Kane and disappears. We'll never get another chance to take down the entire network. Victoria was pacing, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. There's a third option. Which is, we give Richard what he really wants. Which is what? I asked. Victoria turned to face me, and I saw the brilliant, ruthless CEO who'd built an empire from ashes. A way to win. Agent Martinez looked skeptical. Mrs. Kane, Richard Sterling is a trained intelligence operative with 8 years of field experience. What could you possibly offer him that would make him release your father? The real Kane Industries financial records, Victoria said quietly. The ones that prove China has been stealing American defense secrets for a decade. The ones worth $40 billion in future contracts. Victoria, if you give him those records. I'm not going to give them to him. Victoria's smile was cold as winter steel. I'm going to let him steal them. What's the difference? The difference, I said, understanding her plan, is that Richard Sterling has never met the real Victoria Kane. Or, Victoria added, looking at me with something that might have been pride, the real David Morrison. Agent Martinez looked between us. I'm not following. Agent Martinez, I said, standing up and taking Victoria's hand. How would you like to watch 2 accountants destroy an international espionage network? With spreadsheets. With math, Victoria corrected. The deadliest weapon in corporate America. For the first time in our 7-year relationship, Victoria Kane and I were about to work as true partners. And Richard Sterling had no idea what was coming. Kane Industries at 4 a.m. looked like a fortress under siege. FBI vehicles surrounded the building while news helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights turning the glass tower into a beacon visible across Los Angeles. Richard Sterling had chosen his battlefield well. 40 floors of vertical maze with a hostage on the executive level and enough security cameras to track every movement. But Richard Sterling had made one crucial mistake. He'd never seen David Morrison and Victoria Kane work together as equals. "The beauty of this plan," Victoria said, adjusting the microphone hidden in her collar, "is that Richard thinks he's finally getting what he's worked for all these years." We sat in the FBI command vehicle, surrounded by screens showing every angle of Kane Industries. Agent Martinez coordinated with tactical teams, while Tommy Chin reviewed the legal implications of what we were about to attempt. "Walk me through it one more time," Martinez said. "Richard wants the master financial records that prove Chinese espionage operations," I explained. "But what he doesn't know is that Victoria and I have been building fake records for the past 6 months. "Not fake," Victoria corrected. "Real records that lead to fake conclusions. Every transaction is legitimate, every number is accurate, but the pattern they create tells a story that isn't true." "What story?" "That Kane Industries has been working for Russian intelligence, not Chinese." Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "When Richard delivers these records to his handlers, they'll realize their entire West Coast operation has been compromised by a foreign rival. Chinese intelligence will eliminate their own network? They'll eliminate everyone who had access to the false information," I confirmed, "including Richard Sterling." Agent Martinez looked skeptical. "That's assuming Richard doesn't realize the records are falsified." "He won't," Victoria said confidently, "because I've been feeding him pieces of this false narrative for months. Tonight just gives him the complete picture he's been waiting for." "And your father?" "Will be released the moment Richard thinks he's won." Tommy Chin looked up from his legal briefs. "Victoria, you understand that if this goes wrong, you'll be charged with aiding and abetting espionage?" "If this goes wrong, I'll be dead." Victoria's voice was matter of fact. "Richard Sterling doesn't leave witnesses." "Then why are you doing this?" Victoria looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in our 7-year relationship: complete trust. "Because," she said quietly, "I'm tired of living in fear. And because my husband just taught me what it means to fight for something you love." Agent Martinez handed us earpieces. "You have 20 minutes before we lose tactical advantage. After that, Sterling will expect federal backup and start eliminating variables." "Starting with Thomas Kane," I said. "Starting with my father," Victoria confirmed. We made our way to Kane Industries through the underground parking garage, avoiding the media circus surrounding the building. The elevator to the 40th floor felt like ascending to our own execution. "David," Victoria said as we rose through the building, "I need you to know something." "What?" "If this plan fails, if Richard kills us both tonight, I want you to know that loving you is the only real thing I've done in my adult life." "Victoria, I kept you in that box for 5 years because I was afraid of how much I needed you. Tonight, walking into this building with you, knowing we might die together, it's the most honest I've ever been." The elevator dinged at the 40th floor. "Victoria?" "Yes. I love you too. The real you. The FBI agent, the CEO, the woman who's been afraid of her own heart for 7 years. All of it." The elevator doors opened to reveal Richard Sterling standing behind Thomas Kane's desk, a gun pointed at the older man's head. Thomas looked exhausted but alert, his eyes finding Victoria immediately. "Sweetheart," he said softly. "Dad." Victoria's voice was steady, but I could feel her trembling beside me. "Victoria." Richard's voice was calm, professional. "I assume you have what I asked for." "I have it." Victoria held up a flash drive. "Every financial record, every classified contract, every piece of evidence that proves Kane Industries has been working with foreign intelligence. And in exchange, you let my father go, and you disappear forever." Richard smiled. "I'm afraid it's not that simple anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean the FBI has been tracking your movements for 6 months. Agent Martinez, Agent Chen, the entire federal task force, they're all part of the Chinese operation." The words hit me like ice water. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Richard gestured toward the windows, where FBI vehicles surrounded the building. "David, did you really think Chinese intelligence would spend 8 years building a network without infiltrating the agencies investigating them?" Victoria stepped forward. "Richard, you're lying." "Am I?" Victoria, why do you think your father's blackmail material was never discovered by the FBI? Why do you think your own investigation was allowed to continue for so long without interference? Because we were careful. Because you were useful. Richard's voice was cold. The FBI task force has been feeding information to Chinese intelligence for 2 years. Your investigation wasn't exposing the espionage network. It was mapping every American asset for easy acquisition. I thought about Agent Martinez's impossible access to classified information, Tommy Chen's convenient appearance at exactly the right moment, the federal safe house that felt more like a staging area than protection. The records on this drive, Richard continued, will be delivered to Chinese intelligence within the hour. But not by me. Then by whom? By Agent Martinez and her team. The same people you've been trusting with your lives. Victoria's face went white. You're saying the FBI agents who've been protecting us are the real enemy? Yes. Richard looked almost sympathetic. Victoria, did you really think you'd stumbled onto an international conspiracy by accident? You've been guided every step of the way. To what end? To this moment, when the CEO of Kane Industries voluntarily hands over classified defense information to foreign agents. Richard's smile was triumphant. Victoria, you've just committed treason on camera, with witnesses, in full view of law enforcement who are obligated to arrest you. The trap was perfect, diabolical in its simplicity. Whether the FBI agents were real or fake, loyal or corrupt, Victoria had just been recorded offering classified information to a known foreign agent. Unless, Richard continued, you choose a different ending to this story. What kind of ending? The kind where Victoria Kane dies tragically in a murder-suicide with her devoted husband, after learning that her father had been betraying American secrets for years. Richard's voice was gentle, almost paternal, much cleaner than a treason trial. And you? Disappear quietly with the grief-stricken testimony of having tried to save my business partner from her father's crimes. Thomas Kane spoke for the first time since we'd entered the office. Richard, you magnificent bastard. Richard looked surprised. Thomas. 8 years, Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger. 8 years I've been wondering when you'd finally make your move. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you've been so focused on manipulating my daughter that you never bothered to investigate her husband. Richard's gun wavered slightly. David Morrison is nobody. A small-town accountant who got lucky in love. David Morrison, Thomas said, standing up slowly, is the son of Colonel James Morrison, United States Army Intelligence. He's the grandson of Ambassador William Morrison, State Department. And he's been undercover for Naval Intelligence for 7 years. The revelation hit the room like a thunderclap. Richard spun to face me, his face white with shock. That's impossible, he whispered. Is it? I said, my voice carrying authority I'd kept hidden for 7 years. Richard, did you really think Naval Intelligence would let a Chinese spy operate on the West Coast without monitoring his activities? The accounting firm, the marriage to Victoria, was deep cover that became real when I fell in love with my target's daughter. I looked at Victoria, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been pride. Victoria, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. The mission was to investigate your father's suspected espionage activities. And you discovered? That Thomas Kane was being blackmailed, not willingly cooperating. And that the real threat was his business partner, who'd been feeding information to Chinese handlers for years. Richard's hand was shaking now. The fertility treatments, the marriage problems, were me trying to protect Victoria from an investigation that could destroy her life. I stepped closer to Richard, and for the first time in the conversation, he took a step backward. Richard, you've been so busy manipulating everyone around you that you never realized you were the one being played. By whom? By me. By Naval Intelligence. By the FBI agents you think are corrupt, but are actually exactly who they appear to be. I smiled. Richard, Agent Martinez isn't working for Chinese intelligence. She's working for me. The safe house, the protection, was real federal protection while we gathered enough evidence to prosecute not just you, but your entire network. Victoria found her voice. The flash drive I'm holding contains real financial records that will lead investigators to every Chinese asset on the West Coast, I confirmed, including the bank accounts where your handlers have been depositing payments. Richard's face crumpled as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. You've been building a case against me for 7 years. I've been building a case against Chinese espionage operations. You just happen to be the biggest fish in the pond. And Victoria? Victoria has been the most valuable undercover asset in FBI history, I said, looking at my wife with genuine admiration. Her investigation into Kane Industries provided the framework for breaking up the largest espionage network in American history. Even though she didn't know you were military intelligence? Especially because she didn't know. Victoria's work was completely authentic, untainted by knowledge of the larger operation. Richard Sterling, master manipulator and international spy, sat down heavily in Thomas Kane's chair. The pregnancy? Is real, Victoria said softly. And it's David's. That was never part of any operation. The affair in Singapore? Never happened. I drugged myself with sleep medication and let you think what you wanted to think. Victoria's voice was steady. Richard, you've been chasing shadows for 3 months. And now, Agent Martinez's voice came through our earpieces. Mr. Sterling, this is the FBI. The building is surrounded. You have 60 seconds to surrender peacefully. Richard looked at the gun in his hand, then at the three of us standing before him. You know what the worst part is? What? Victoria asked. I actually thought I was in love with you. Richard, Victoria said gently, you don't know what love is. Love isn't about control or manipulation or getting what you want. Love is about choosing someone's happiness over your own safety. Like David did for you. Like David did for me. Every day for 7 years. Richard Sterling set his gun on the desk and raised his hands in surrender. As FBI agents flooded the office, I took Victoria's hand and felt something I hadn't experienced since our wedding day. Complete happiness. David, she said quietly, when were you going to tell me you're a spy? When were you going to tell me you're pregnant? I told you that part tonight. Then I guess we both have some explaining to do. Victoria laughed, and the sound was like music after years of silence. David Morrison, will you marry me? We're already married. No, she said. Victoria Kane married David Morrison. I want Victoria Morrison to marry the man who spent 7 years protecting her without her knowing it. Even if it means raising a baby while our careers are completely insane. Especially then. 6 months later, we were sitting in a different accounting office, our accounting office, in Riverside, California. Victoria's pregnancy was showing now, a beautiful curve that she couldn't hide behind power suits and boardroom confidence. She didn't want to hide it anyway. Kane Industries had been restructured under federal supervision, with Thomas Kane serving as interim CEO while investigators completed their review. The Chinese espionage network had been dismantled, with Richard Sterling's cooperation leading to arrests across 3 states. Morrison & Morrison, certified public accountants, Victoria said, reading the sign we'd just hung in the window. Has a nice ring to it. You sure you don't miss running a billion-dollar corporation? David, I spent 7 years playing a character in someone else's story. This is the first time in my adult life that I'm being myself. And who is that? The woman who fell in love with a small-town accountant and never wanted to leave. Our first client walked through the door at exactly 9 a.m. A young entrepreneur who wanted help starting a food truck business. As I walked her through the financial planning process, I caught Victoria watching me with the same expression she'd worn the first day we met. What? I asked after the client left. I was just thinking about that first audit you did for Kane Industries. The fake one. The fake one. Victoria smiled. You know what wasn't fake about it? What? The way you looked at me like I was the most interesting person you'd ever met. You were. Even though I was lying about everything? You weren't lying about everything. You were lying about your cover story. But the woman who brought me coffee every morning and asked about my family and listened to my stories about growing up in Riverside, that was real. How could you tell? Because, I said, pulling her into my arms, people can fake a lot of things. But they can't fake the way they laugh at bad jokes, or the way they cry during commercials, or the way they look when they think no one is watching. And how did I look? Like someone who'd forgotten how to be happy and was trying to remember. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, pregnancy hormones, she claimed, though I suspected it was something deeper. David. Yes. Thank you for seeing me. The real me. Even when I couldn't see her myself. Thank you for letting me protect you. Even when you didn't know you needed protecting. Our daughter was born 3 months later, Emma Morrison, named after my grandmother who taught me that love was something you chose every day, not something that happened to you. Victoria held her for the first time in the hospital room, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Victoria Kane completely at peace. She's perfect, Victoria whispered. She's ours. David, do you think we'll be good at this? The normal life thing. I looked at my wife, former FBI agent, former CEO, current small business owner, and new mother, and realized that there was nothing normal about Victoria Morrison. There never would be. Victoria, we spent 7 years lying to each other about who we really were and still managed to fall in love. I think we can handle anything. Even diaper changes? Even diaper changes. As the sun set over Riverside, California, I held my wife and daughter and thought about the journey that had brought us here. The betrayals and revelations, the corporate espionage and federal investigations, the moment when two people decided to stop hiding from each other and start building something real. Victoria had been right that first night in the accounting office. Love wasn't about being safe. It was about choosing to trust someone with the power to destroy you. But what she'd learned, what we'd both learned, was that the right person wouldn't use that power against you. They'd use it to build something beautiful instead. What did this story teach you about the difference between love and convenience? About the courage it takes to be vulnerable with someone who could break your heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them see who you really are. And sometimes, that's the only thing worth doing.